And now, ladies and gentlemen, in our second panel of today, we're going to discuss the opportunities and growth strategies so that we can generate jobs that are sustainable, sustainable growth, and that are aligned with the environmental protection. We have national and international panelists, okay, so that we can have economic activities that are going to preserve our forests and our biodiversity. This panel is also going to highlight some points how the national development agencies they can boost the green and sustainable growth in our country. So to start the second panel, I would like to invite, okay, the director of the Mr. André Luiz Campos de Andrade. We would also like to invite the president of the Amazon Bank, Mr. Luiz Cláudio Lessa. And the superintendent for the environment of the Amazon Fund from the BNDES, Mr. Nabil Kadri. And also Mr. Pedro de Lemos, coordinator of the Indicators Evidence on Human Rights from the Ministry of Human Rights and Citizenship. And so now we have the commercial director of the Banpará Bank, Ms. Graciele Galvão, who is going to start with the comments now. So I would like to pass the floor to Ms. Graciele Galvão. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Graciele Galvão. I'm the commercial director of the Bank of Pará on behalf of our CEO, Ruth Melo, that unfortunately could not come to this event. I would like to thank you for the invitation and to tell all of you that for us it's a great honor to be here participating in such a wonderful event, the 8th Development Forum organized by the ABDE, and I would like to mention that CEO Ruth Melo is also a member of the board of directors of the ABDE, and for the bank and for our state, this is very relevant and this is very good for our bank. I would also like to mention that the topic of this panel, I believe, is something that is aimed at the world. Sustainability is a general topic in which at the schools, on the streets, during the events, we all discuss this, and to be a part of this moment is very important. I would also like to mention a little bit of the importance of this topic about sustainable development. So I would like to leave all of you with a certain reflection in events such as this one. So, I wish we had started all of the important events around the world a few years ago like this, and the impacts on the environment would be much lower. And I talk to my children a lot about this. I discuss with them how important it is for them to read about it, hear about it, because since we are young children, we should share this information with our children. And also to share with you that for us it's a great honor as the state of Pará to talk about the COP30, which is the UN conference, and for the first time it's going to happen in the Amazon, in the capital of my state, in the city of Belém. And it's a great honor to host such an event. The state government, jointly with the government agencies, all of the municipalities, we are holding hands together, setting forth strategies, ideas, so that we can show to the world the importance of this topic that is being discussed today. And also to share with you, now let's discuss our specific panel, the topic for this panel. So the Bank of Pará, Banpará, is present in 144 municipalities. And so the bank is present in 138 municipalities among the 144 that we have, and we're going to reach 3 more municipalities. So we want to take to all of the municipalities in the state access to banking services, access to our services and products. And nowadays the bank has been developing products aimed at developing products and services, highlighting that we need to fund projects that have low carbon emissions. And this is also part of the state government's agenda, so that we can be able to do like the director of Caixa has. Banpará also has this social role to offer access to its population to development resources, and even more now with the event that Banpará is one of the hosts of COP30. And so our role, it's our homework, it's our duty, it's our commitment. The state bank, the state bank is going to be a part of this. So now we're going to discuss our topic, a very important topic, regarding what are the strategies for a sustainable growth connected to the protection of the environment. And together we should debate the opportunities and growth strategies generating jobs connected to the environmental agenda that Brazil has, as we discussed. So how important it is for us to emphasize this topic on a daily basis, everything we have already done. So we aim to discuss how we can make these strategies a reality, involving many public stakeholders and creating a favorable scenario for our economy, for the economic activity that is going to preserve our forests. So now discussing this briefly due to the time. So among the main topics that the bank has, and now we're going to pass the floor to the panelists, and thank you so much for being here. Mr. André Luiz Campos is going to be the first panelist. He is the director of governance at the Ministry of the Environment, and he's going to discuss this topic. And we're going to discuss the topic and how could you contribute about the importance of the funding so that we can make our environmental agenda go forward, and how the development agencies can boost the green development in Brazil. Thank you very much. Before anything else, I would like to thank all of you for being here today, and for all of those who are online watching us. And I would like to thank the president of the ABDE, President Celso, and I would also like to greet all of the authorities who are present here at the event. As it has already been mentioned, this Climate Governance Department is within the National Secretariat for Climate Change within the Ministry of the Environment, and for the first time, the Ministry of the Environment has created such a department. So it is a climate governance department. So we're going to have 2 departments working on this when it comes to governance and policy. And this shows the understanding of the ministry, of Minister Marina, of President Lula, of how important this topic is for our ministry, for Brazil, and also the global efforts, to fight against all of these climate changes. Before going into the topic per se,
about what is being thought about and what is being done. There are many numbers. I would forget, maybe forgot. If I do it by memory, I might get it wrong. We're talking about investments, financing. It's good for us to align in terms of climate. I liked very much Ivan's speech and Gustavo as well. It's a friend here, and I was working in the Ministry of Environment, and it's worthwhile doing some kind of leveling of where is the money going. Why isn't Brazil receiving this money? This is the first question we have to do. Given the CPI, the climate policy initiative, most of you have access to that for climatic finance. 420 billion directed to Asia, East Asia, a bit of China. 120 billion for Eastern Europe, 88 billion for US and Canada, and Latin America, 35 billion. Africa with 35 billion. Orient, Asia, 33, Oceania, 19. So that's the first question, is where is the money going? Why is the money not coming over here? And when you put two variables that have been worked in the previous and in terms of greenhouse gases, if you see the tendency, the emissions are growing in the southern hemisphere because the money is not going where emissions are growing. And when we get, unfortunately, I got this data now, but I didn't do the calculus. If the number of people affected, lives lost in the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, it's even more visible that there's a lot of wrong things going in the climatic funding for the global south, Latin America. And you have to have solidarity to think about Latin America and Brazil, but also think about the African continent, which is paying a lot of the climate change bill. And to try to balance this, when we talk with investors, the main concern is risk and return. How do I reduce risk of investment in South America, Africa? I think that's a fundamental point. The resources are going to North America and Europe because of the risk. How do we reduce the risk? The other issue is, which is very important, it has to be connected, not only in facing climate change, but also combating inequality. We don't have the political mandate to think about neutral environmental strategy, at least as public policymakers, to get to 2050, and we still have the same social inequalities when we travel around Brazil in the different regions. We cannot just simply think in reducing CO2, get carbon neutral, and see what we're seeing in Brazil now. So within the strategy that the Ministry of Environment, that is thinking of governance, we have 4 big gaps that we have to develop, or sorry, not develop, attack, reduce. First is the political gap. Without political will in the agenda will not go forward. We have to keep this political tension that is in the government for the medium and long term. Otherwise, the agenda will not advance. Another fundamental point, any agreement, sectorial, that we'll have to do has to have the political validation. Even if it's a technical discussion, we will have to do political discussion. What will be the bill? And we have to have that in mind. They also like stability, that things are working in a coordinated manner. So when we have the PACs, ecological transformation of the ministry, energy transition from the Ministry of Energy, climate program that I will comment a bit in the Ministry of Environment. The first question we have, how will these guys coordinate? How will the coordination be? What will be the convergence? We've been talking with other ministries through ecological and energy transition. We have a secretariat in the Ministry of Mines and Energy, but I speak for my colleagues in the ministries. We are very aware of the need for coordination and integration, and to reform institutions and processes, give more transparency, which is what we're doing here. We're talking to the national development system with the different areas of the country. I cannot think about climate change policy without understanding and without considering the regional differences that I have in the country. That's an important point. Another aspect is resources, not only financial resources. Gustavo mentioned about capabilities, metrics. How can I have in the government, state, and municipal, but also in the private sector that understand what is climate change, what is the risk, and what are the opportunities. So we have to have a great effort in terms of capacity building, and we're thinking about that within the ministry. And information. I don't know if you had this information about how financing is working in the map, but it's important to put all the information on the table to level things. That's we can get out of a debate which can be shallow if we don't bring data, information, to something more in depth, to dialogue, to make dialogue of a theme that is so transversal, so multi-level like this. You need number, data, otherwise we stay only the narratives and the qualitative aspects. And we have to advance in the quantitative aspect to take decisions based on that recent information and based in the best information which the IPCC and others that are working in the climate agenda are asking for. So based in these four great gaps which I mentioned, despite the short time that have restrictions on team, budget, consultancy, of what we have to do, the team that we received in the ministry is very small, reduced. I taught other ministries as well. In our point of view, we were able to advance in many points. Some of them, first in the discussion of the pluri-annual plan. It's a new program of the PPA. It was voted by civil society. The program that should be the greatest priority of the government. Over 4 million consultations, and this plan was the main one. It's a program that is being put in the PPA in terms of facing climate change. The other one that is derived from the four gaps is the review of the national policy for climate change to align that to the objectives, to the Paris Agreement, but looking at climate neutrality for 2030 and combating poverty and inequality, like I mentioned. In terms of institutions, we approved in June the reestablishment of the Climate Change Committee that is presided by the Chief of Staff of the Presidency to make the coordination effort. Besides that committee, we are thinking and designing the second semester a National Council of Climate Change, multi-stakeholders involving government, subnational, civil society, private sector, so that be a point of contact and exchange of experiences and social control of what we're doing. In the next weeks, and we also create the project for the National Plan on Climate Change and the Climate Plan. And I see a direct possibility of talking with the system of development, because this plan will be the plan where we will take our objectives and the 2025, sorry. So we'll have 9 sectorial plans for mitigation, each with one objective to be mitigated. I know my time is over, and 12 adaptation plans. This is the important point. It's not only a plan, but we will have a start, end, and and the cost of each sectorial plan and how we will finance these. And 2 points before I end, which I'd like to put forth: the sustainable taxonomy, which was being coordinated with the Ministry of Finance. We noticed that this will bring greater clarity of what is sustainable flow, what is non-sustainable, and today it's be read in the extraordinary session of the Environmental Committee in the Senate, the substitute project as regards a project set by Senator Leila, which was a work done by many hands within the federal government and articulated with Senator Leila, and we sent her this pre-project so she could put it in the commission. So despite the only 8 months of the government, these are points that we have to celebrate, besides the reduction of deforestation that was way smaller than last year's. We're talking about forests, of course, but it's important to put. I'll stop here, and we'll have another round of questions, I imagine. Thank you, Mr. André. We thank you for your contribution. The next would be Mr. Luiz Lessa, President of BASA. Pleasure to know you. We will open here a bit the theme. Feel free to expose or to the experience of the Bank of Amazon in the investments that help sustainable development and the environment. Thank you. More than anything, thank you, and greetings to my colleagues in the panels and those that are present and those who are online. So to start, to talk a little bit about the Bank of the Amazon, like the name says, it acts in the Amazonian region as a whole, and 2 more states of the legal Amazon, which is part of Maranhão and part of Mato Grosso. And taking the lead of my colleague from giving the history of Caixa, I would also like to talk about a curiosity about the Bank of the Amazon. It was created in 1942, an effort of the war. After the invasion of Indochina, there was a reduction in the production of rubber. There was an effort here in the Amazon, in our second cycle of rubber, so we could increase the production of rubber for the Allies' efforts. This was a consortium between Brazilians and Americans, and you had the famous soldiers of the rubber in the region. With the end of the war, it became a development bank focused in the Amazon and focused on the development of the region. Now it's the main agent of development in the northern region. We work in the 450 municipalities of the region and represent 67% of the support or development that is sent to those municipalities. We have a deep knowledge of how you do development in the Amazonian region. We do it every day, and it is main activity, our bread and butter. All communities taking knowledge of this bank and need for credit, because one of our experiences is that it's no good just to take the credit to someone who lives to riverine communities or those who live from extracting cocoa or pineapple or others from the forest. Because without technical assistance, the credit, instead of developing that community, just creates a horrible issue, which is the debt in that community, and or default of that debt in that community. So within that aspect, there is a situation that is very interesting. We talk a lot about maintenance of the forest. This was put here by some colleagues, and we have a situation that sometimes is forgotten, is the situation of the 33 million people that live in that region in the Amazon and have to take their livelihood and sustenance and to improve their lives. We hear a lot about President Lula that these services be paid for, and is exactly what we believe in. It's not possible a state like in the Amazon to have 97% of their forest preserved and 67% of their population under the poverty line. My colleague here knows the Pará very well. We have areas of preservation, and we have open air sewage taking pollution from the waters, and the riverine population are not able to fish and to get their sustenance from the river. And some native species of the region are disappearing due to that pollution. So what do we believe in? That besides our traditional instruments of credit, for the reforestation of degraded areas, bioeconomy, productive chains, more food, a series of finances like that are common finances, traditional. What we need is to have other type of finances to take into consideration other conditions of the Amazon. When President Lula says that we need to pay for the maintenance, how do we work that? And that's what we've been doing. My friend Morgan from IDB, he was in the opening. We talked a lot about that in Belém in the last meeting, and we decided to join hands and to take this out of the just plans. Now we have regulated instruments, which is the green CPR, that allows the person that has a preservation area, is a rural producer. It's just enough that the Amazon is different from the center-west or from the south. Preservation areas in a property in the Amazon, 80% of the property has to be preserved. He can only use 20%. So the preservation of these 80% is a cost for producers. How can we do it so that it becomes income from them? He is preserving the forest for the benefit of all. And we have some companies that have production that takes into account all of the respect for the environment, and this creates additional costs. So together with IDB, we started a discussion in how are we going to do these credit instruments that are so important for the financing this conservation, and that generates income and jobs for the people who there live. We started this discussion and now a bit advanced in terms of the creation of an international fund. We will get these resources together with IDB to invest in the chain that is necessary to get green certificates and also ORs, which is responsible origin certificates. All of this chain is still very incipient, very expensive. Even if the farmer has a preservation area, how can he will do a certificate of green certificate that he's preserving his area? This is very expensive process, and it isn't worthwhile for small producers. And also, besides being expensive, it's very complex. So we want to bring this international resources. For us, the IDB, the Amazon Bank, we know the region, and we create development all the time there. So we can invest in these chains, in these certifications, and in the assets, conservation assets. So in the end, the producers that have conditions that can emit these CPRs might have this emission, and the fund itself could buy it and make the commercialization and generate the conditions so that these titles can circulate, so we can have this cycle and to work in a continuous manner to simplify it and to work in this chain that generates these documents, helping farmers and companies to emit these certificates and buying these certificates and commercialize it. So I think we can do the differential that those who preserve the forest have to be paid, and we think that this instrument is the best way or resource. We are developing this fund, and we should be launching in COP28 in Dubai, and we're putting on efforts to see if we can take this product there to show the world that we have, yes, how to pay those that are keeping the sustainable forest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Luiz Cláudio. And BASA is a great partner that we have in the State Bank of Pará, in the North region of Brazil, and the BNDES, and is going to be the next person. We have a great partnership with the BNDES and with BASA. And what was interesting about what he said is how important it is for you to teach, educate the clients that you have regarding the services and products. We don't want to generate problems for our clients. We want to offer solutions to them, and we are careful enough to show to the client how the credit should be used. And now let's pass the floor to the next panelist, Mr. Nabil Kadri, Superintendent for the Environment and Management of the Amazon Fund created by the BNDES. So I would like to highlight a topic, and then you can go on, okay? Challenges and opportunities of the development that align the protection of the environment in Brazil. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here at the ABD's forum because we are part of the National Development System. So it's a great, great moment, and we are very proud to be part of this system. It's not every country that has such a sound public development system, and it is very relevant when we start talking about sustainability, the environment. It's important to bear in mind that in the development agencies, the development banks, this agenda was born and it flourished within the Brazilian financial sector. We have to acknowledge this in a public way. And so the first financial organizations to have environment departments were the public financial institutions. And so the greatest innovations regarding financial products, regarding how we can have different approaches, they were also born from this national development system. And then it was scaled up, it was adopted by the central bank, and this was being adopted by the entire system, and it spread out to the entire system. And it's our responsibility, we who are the parts of the system, and our responsibility is greater than we can imagine. Sometimes we have no idea of our role, how to replicate this, feasible solutions, important solutions. For example, the first Brazilian green bonds, they were issued by the BNDES, public banks. So the green bonds, the national green bonds, the first ones, they were issued by this development system. So bearing this in mind, I would like to share this with the panel. There is a huge conviction at the BNDES that Brazil has a huge potential that is not being used to its fullest, okay? And so we are a super diverse country. We can get any country in the world. Brazil is the most diverse, be it cultural, environmental, etc. All of the diversities we can think about, they are present in Brazil. And our colleague Lessa mentioned about the Amazon. Structurally speaking, we have a challenge that is not a pride for us, which is the inequalities that we have in Brazil. So we are super diverse, culturally, environmentally, we are unequal when it comes to our social aspects, racial aspects, all kinds of inequality that you can think about. Brazil is there in the first positions of the ranking. And so we need to work hard to invert this process or So we need to unite these two agendas, the diversity agenda, so that we can diminish our inequalities. And we're never going to get a medium and long run sustainable development unless we meet the demands of these two areas. We are either going to increase the problems or increase the inequalities. These two agendas have to work side by side so that our huge diversity can be the trigger of our way of reducing these inequalities. Otherwise, we're not going to move forward. When we talk about the forest agenda, the concept of forest is an ample concept. We're talking about different biomes, the Brazilian savanna, the Pantanal, the Amazon forest. And so Brazil has different forests. It has different ways of economically incorporating these assets, incorporating this diversity into our economic models. But then we face a huge challenge, not only for the BNDES, but for the entire development system. Brazil has not been able to find the best economic equation to make the services from our forests feasible. And we waste many opportunities that we have. Smaller countries, less diverse countries than Brazil, they are the main producers, exporters, processors of wood products, non-wood products, and this is a huge contradiction. It's a huge contradiction. Countries that don't even have the vocation for this kind of industry, with a lot of technology, a lot of innovation, a lot of coordination within the private sector, they were able to create economies that improve their life quality, diminish inequalities, and we are unable to do that. And that's the importance of the development agencies in Brazil, to identify these opportunities, acknowledge that we have challenges. It's not an easy task because the forest agenda, maintaining our forest standing up or keeping our forest standing up, is something that encourages people. Everybody is interested in that. Everybody wants to work with that. Everybody considers that a positive agenda, but it's not easy. So it has its own complexities, its own bottlenecks. We have challenges that go from institutional issues, regulatory frameworks, land issues. We know that they are difficult, and they go through logistical issues, because we know that logistics for wood and non-wood products, it's completely different from the logistics of generating commodities, producing commodities. We go through production chain issues. So in the Brazilian diversity, social diversity, they could be processed, delivered to the international markets in a standardized way, generating income. But we are producing these products as if we were 400 years ago, living 400 years ago. We have no innovation, no technology. We do not discuss this with the academia, with the producers. These products, they need to be paid for based on that, and we end up once again missing out on great opportunities that are not added. Why not? Because we cannot find these models that align solving these challenges, structural challenges, with access in the grassroots for those who really want to do this, and we can remove this gap. And we are discussing this during forums such as this one. We are discussing the opportunities, and those who are there living in a reservation area, in an indigenous village, in a rural area, in a private property, that they have agricultural production in a forest. They could be preserving the forest. They could be extracting their nuts, their any other products from the forest, because it's not easy, it's not trivial. So we need to get these agendas closer together. Besides what we talk about in our forums, we need to analyze those there in the grassroots communities, in the local communities. It's not a single instrument or initiative that is going to solve this dilemma or this equation, because we are facing many, many different challenges. So in the last 15 years, we have dedicated ourselves to try to create innovative solutions to respect our different biomes, forests, our different biodiversity, non-refundable projects jointly with Abrapi. So companies, communities, research centers, and with non-refundable resources. And based on what André mentioned, jointly with the Ministry of the Environment, we were able to launch once again the Climate Change Fund, leaving the 400 million reais a year to 10 billion reais a year. That's the objective of this fund. And based on bioeconomy, native forests, all of the development agencies, they can access these climate change funds. And so we had the BRD, BMG, and now with this leap in the number, in the amount of volume, we're going to be able to achieve that. We're going to be able to work with other regions, with better interest rates. It's 1% a year. The interest rates for the forest is 1% a year. So we're never going to face this problem again. There is a lack of funds. No, the money is not expensive. The money is not impossible to achieve. So we need to go there to the communities and deliver everything we can and make the difference. Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, moving on, let's pass the floor to Mr. Pedro de Lemos, coordinator of the General Department on Indicators and Evidence on Human Rights. He's going to discuss protection programs for the defenders of the forest and the human rights perspective in having a sustainable development. Thank you, Graciele. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to greet our colleagues who are here on the panel with me. Thank you so much, ABD, for the invitation that you made to the Ministry of Human Rights and Citizenship. Thank you for the invitation. The first topic that I would like to discuss with this, and the Ministry of Human Rights would like to bring this to the discussion. We're not far from the remarks made by the previous panelists. For the Ministry of Human Rights and Citizenship and for our Minister, Mr. Silvio Almeida, preserving the environment, discussing the preservation of the environment cannot be separated from the protection of human rights, promoting citizenship. So the struggle for a dignified life and the things that were discussed previously, they are closely connected with the discussion that is being carried out now during this forum. And I'm going to share some concepts that I believe are important and that we should discuss. The concept of climate justice. Minister Silvio has been discussing this. And an idea that climate justice needs to reflect historical fights and constitutional rights and the history of Brazil and the relationship between the peoples and the Brazilian policies. So we have to bring to the debate traditional communities, black people, women, indigenous populations, vulnerable communities that are the most impacted by the climate changes, and they are the most impacted by the increase in the rains of landslides, and so the lack of water resources, and also due to a lesser way of predicting the climate, the productive systems and everything they can get from the forest. So the Ministry of Human Rights and Citizenship, and I'm not only talking about the climate agendas, but all of our actions, they are based on this understanding. So we have to fight for our democracy. We have to fight for our citizenship. We have to fight against the negation of the realities of climate change. We have to reduce our inequalities. And one of the first policies of our ministry that we should discuss, and this is core for us, regarding the environment, the preservation of the environment, has to do with the protection of defenders, environmental defenders, environment experts, and they are critical stakeholders so that we can be successful in the discussion that we're having now, the 2030 agenda, in a country that, besides what Mr. Nabil mentioned, it is a country that is important when we talk about inequality. And it's a country that, when we discussed the assassination of environment defenders, human rights defenders, journalists, environmental experts, and they are in the center of everything that we do regarding sustainable development and also having productive forests. Another point that is important for us is the social participation. We have been trying to promote in a very radical and expanded way social justice. We try to add this to all of our policies and programs. And I would like to discuss a program that has become a priority for the minister, which is the Marajó program, that it has been trying to build a huge intersectoral network involving many government agencies. And we also have, as a protagonist, the state of Pará. And we have a centrality of the social participation from the initial phases to the implementation of the programs. We have been investing in the Marajó program by offering services, rendering services, public policies. We have been promoting citizenship. We have been protecting human rights. And we have been paying a lot of attention to the land issues. We believe that the preservation of the environment, the production of a sustainable development, keeping our forests standing up, it needs to involve and to have as its guiding idea the land issues. The demarcation of the indigenous lands, the demarcation of the maroon lands, access to the land for the populations, for the traditional communities, and this is an essential phase so that we can have food security, so that we can have all of our forests standing up, so that we can have this huge potential that we can find in the forest. And the traditional communities, they have a big role in this, and this has already been mentioned. So we hope that this Marajó citizenship program has great results, because by the end of this administration, we would like to improve the conditions of life of the people who live on the Marajó Island, and we would like to see this program becoming an example, a successful example of coordination, intersectorial coordination, social participation, so that we can think about other policies for other territories. And bearing this in mind, and now bringing this to my reality, so the last panel concluded the discussion that we should create policies and work with these programs, and via these programs we have to think about how to fund these programs. always mentioning the indicators, the evidence that are going to help us to assess and monitor these programs. We need to set forth criteria so that we can give the funds, and it is essential for these indicators not only to include social indicators, indicators that are going to protect people's human lives. We are creating a human rights observatory with social indicators, national social indicators, with analyzing several dimensions. We're trying to create a network that is going to create evidence and qualify all of this debate. And this goes through our discussions. How can we discuss this? What should we do? What should we do? What can we do with the directly impacted stakeholders, the most vulnerable, the most impacted by the climate change? About what sustainable development are we talking about? What green economy are we talking about? What is climate justice?
We have good indicators, robust numbers, direct participation from the traditional communities, those that are most affected. These are the central points for this discussion. I'd like to end just with a reference to the speech of Minister Silvio Almeida when he took on his role in the ministry. The global community has a new definition of sustainable development that talks to the new realities, the needs of our people, and concrete ability to overcome lack of resources and others. And I'd also like to add to keep the forest standing up. Perfect. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you all that participated in the panel. These are important themes for our knowledge, and we take these as an experiences to our states. Now we're open to questions. So there's a question here for the president of BASA, Mr. Luiz. This green fund in partnership with IDB to foment the green CPR can create credit lines with environmental assets as guarantees. So the original idea of the fund was to unlock the green CPR chain and the ATCs. Like I said, it's a very complex chain. That's objective number one. To take and to assume take to the fund is certification, the origin of the certificates, and from then on to do the process of emission and to guarantee the purchase of these CPRs at a first level, these certificates, and then the fund to distribute in the best way to the various financial instruments and the locations of these, so that the funds have more funds, more profitable, and that they can feed the process. Of course, that the fund, as a way to capture funds, it can generate in a second scale to generate some kind of financing, but it's not its initial priority. We want that this instrument of the green CPRs and the ATCs do in fact would happen in Brazil. Thank you, President. I have one question, but I think part of the panel already answered. Considering time, we are a bit late, so I have a question where we can discuss quickly. What are the main challenges to give impulse to those projects that are aligned to projects that deal with conservation? I think all of already in a way have already contributed, but in our view as a northern region, and as the representative of the development bank mentioned, there is the credit. We have to give the legality to these funds to operate with these credits. In my view, That's the great challenge that the banks have. You have, but it's prospection. But when you go to the reality, you notice that there is still a lot of difficulties, especially when involving in terms of land regularization or legalization. So just very quickly, what are the main challenges to give impulse of the financing to these projects that are aligned with conservation in Brazil? So I think it goes to having regulatory landmarks that are believable, that can be implemented. Brazil is known for having good legislation in environment, but why can't we implement them? That's the issue. Part of that is in the discussion of the capabilities that I wanted to discuss, to level this in terms of elaboration of projects, monitoring and follow-up of the projects. We have a diversity, which Nabil mentioned, including in the capabilities for states and municipalities. We have to face this in a definite way so that we can make viable the different states and municipalities so that they can access these financing opportunities. But we need to train this personnel. I just like to compliment in the sense that there are two levels for this question. The first is the credit or technical. What are the difficulties as regards the operation of the credit itself, be it the guarantee, environment? Any financial institution would have that, be it public or private. It's the function of the credit itself. But when we look at our role as institutions for development and all those within the ABDE, there's a second layer, which is not only the access to credit, but the formalities and the central bank, how we and with our instruments can act to make more viable structural changes. And this kind of decision takes time. It's not going to show up in your balance this year. It will take 2, 3, 4 years. But the main is the focus in which objective, what is the reality that I, as an institution, I am willing to contribute to change. And credit is only one of the aspects. Many others are involved. Banpará has a deep relationship with the state government. This exchange of the state institution with the state government that has this institutionality to deal with these more structured issues can lead to this transformation. So I think that's the main message from my speech. Separate what are the dimension, the credit for the credit, and development institution and their mission. And just complementing my colleague's speech, I think the issue of credit is that we have two situations. First is credit, how does it get to the end? And it's very similar to a bank. You have to have regularization, we have to have the adequate guarantees, it has to be viable, not only in terms of sustainability, the green issue, but it has to be sustainable financially, because if it's not, the credit will become a problem, like I said initially. Another point that we have, speaking of Amazon in general, it's our understanding of what is sustainability in the Amazon. When we talk in terms of credit, we have some understanding that are different. Even within Brazil, the Amazon is discussed in the São Paulo financial market, but it has no to Maracupu, Maués, or Marajó. So the Faria Lima people, nothing against these, they know Marajó only by a tourist postcard. They've never been there, and if they did went there, they just did a trip and to see some buffaloes. So only tourism. To understand the dimension of what is to deal in the Amazon, you have to be in the Amazon to understand what the day-to-day, and the region itself is very diversified. That is an agri-industrial pole in the south of Pará, where we have a coverage, digital coverage. There are roads. We can measure the logistics about hours by car. There are locations, there are no roads and no satellite coverage. And we can measure the distance by hours, by flying hours. So 6 hours in a plane is relatively close there. From 6 hours, that's kind of far. But there are other places where we don't measure the distance in hours, we measure in days. To go into the Amazon 2 days by boat is close. I'm going to go there quick. But more than 2 days, that's a little bit further away. 7 days is, then you have to plan for it. So in our case, we're dealing with all the municipalities. How are we going to deal with credit? We have digital instruments, okay. How are we going to get credit to São Gabriel da Cachoeira? That is 5 days by boats. They will have to sign a contract and have to do some kind of proof. They would have to go 5 days to Manaus and then 7 days going back. Why 7? Because it's upstream and against the current, and depending on how the Solimões River is going, it might last a little bit longer. So what I'm saying, in the case of the Amazon, we have to do credit. We have to understand the dynamic of the region. And here we have some even in the legislation. Here in the Central West, for example, there's a rural producer that has a rural module, and he has a part that has suffered embargo. He can do credit, and the embargo continues. But in the Amazon, no. We impose that if they have 1,000 hectares, if 100 square meters, all of the 1,000 hectares are embargoed, and he cannot receive credit. Why is the Amazon different than the rest of the country? The mitigating instruments of the combination of credit with sustainability are not the same as the rest of the country. And the same is for the international agencies. A lot was spoken about GCF, and I had a proposal funding for us to distribute in the Amazon. It's unviable. GCF gives me $100 million, but I will spend $300 million to do the certification they ask for. You cannot discuss Amazon in the international organism and multilateral agencies in Geneva, Paris, Rome, Helsinki, or even Washington. You have to come here and understand the day-to-day dynamic. GCF cannot stamp to do distribution of resources to certain sectors because I have a way cheaper constitutional fund, and they have no idea that that exists. So collaborating with my colleague from the BNDES, talking about the environment, we're basically talking about the Amazon. To do business in Amazon, to create development in the Amazon, you need to understand the dynamic of the Amazon and those who live there. The forest standing up is important, but the person under the tree needs to have income, salary, buy resources for its family, and that's not taken into account. It's done, of course, only romantically, the tree, not the person under it. So our criticism, and I've done this in many places, we have to take the two items into account. The tree standing up, but the people under are important. They live there, and their sustenance in an ancestral manner there. And we're not going to change this ancestrality. So this has to be taken into account in this process of credit that starts in an international organism but gets to the development bank at the end, and we're not able to do it. Perfect. Pedro, Luiz Carlos speech. Luiz Cláudio, sorry, apologies. So Mr. Lessa's speech was very good and touches the central points that I was going to talk about, that to bring other two issues that are important for the Human Rights Ministry, which is education and culture. When we talk about these projects and financing projects, we think about the importance of training, capability building, so that they can access these resources, so they can produce projects. But it's important to understand that education and communication should reach the inverse. These development agencies and government, those that create policies, and even legislators, get to know the country, know the Amazon, know the Cerrado, not only the big cities and those that you have in postcards. So to think of education for those who are creating the policies and developing mechanisms of finance, so that not only the small producer, the indigenous, the quilombola, might be prepared to deal with the demands that are done, so that they might have access to these resources, but that these demands be more adequate to what they do, produce, or are. That's it. Perfect, perfect. Thank you. I'd like to thank you all, your contribution. Everything that we take from here is knowledge. And I would like to reinforce the importance of the state banks together with the state government in Pará in strengthening the development, stimulus, and credit operations that generate sustainability, and that we can have this homework done so that our children, and for the quality, our life quality and of our kids. I would like to congratulate BNDES for the excellent event. As Banpará, we participated in the event that was in Belém, so I really would like to congratulate them for the excellent actions that you've been developed with the partner banks and together with the states. I think that this is a great advance for our country, and I do believe that in the future our quality of life and of our kids will be way better. Thank you very much. So, in the name of the BNDES, I thank you all that participated in this second panel.